Morning, everyone, and welcome to our session. Today, we are here to listen to a very interesting topic of our interdisciplinary RC, and the topic is on doing field work. So, for conducting this session, we have invited Professor Chandan Kumar Sarma, who is a professor in the Department of Sociology in Tezpur University, and also serving as the head IC in the Department of Social Work, Tezpur University. Sir has done his higher education, including PhD from Delhi School of Economics under Delhi University, and some other positions that he has been holding are head in the Department of Nutrition and Community Action Research Center, supported by Department of Social Welfare, Government of Assam, and UNICEF from September 2019. He was also the program coordinator of Special Assistant Program University Grants Commission and coordinator of Maulana Azad Center for Research on Northeast India, Tezpur University. Sir has been honored with a number of fellowship and scholarships, and some reputed publications belong to Sir are Coronasphere Narratives on COVID-19 from India and its neighbor. This is a post-review production stage as per the Sir's CV. Fixed Borders, Fluid Boundaries, Identity, Resources and Mobility in Northeast India from Routledge. Samaj Nirmaনৰ Adi Akhara from Agbag Guwahati. অসমীয়া কোন এক ৰাজনৈতিক সমাজতাত্ত্বিক অৱলোকন from Span Publications, and Cultural Studies Themes and Perspectives from Tezpur University. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, sir, to our RC, and our participants are eagerly waiting for to listen to your lecture, sir. So kindly start your session.
Thank you, Dr. Sabda, and thank you for this invitation. Good morning to all, and let me at the very beginning apologize for this delay due to some technical glitch in the room from where I'm operating. Nevertheless, and as I understand, the group is of mixed kind, and my topic is especially relevant basically in the field of social sciences, and with special reference to anthropology and cultural anthropology and sociology. So the students of sociology and cultural anthropology would not have wouldn't find anything new perhaps in my lecture, but those from other departments, other faculty, perhaps for them it might be a new subject. So therefore I am trying to keep it as simple and general as possible. And as I understand, my talk will be of almost 1 hour duration, and I would be happy to take questions at the end of the talk. And if you have any clarification to seek, please don't hesitate to ask me at the end of the talk. So let me now start my presentation. See, the title is Doing Field Work. Social sciences, especially sociology and social or cultural anthropology, they have been engaged with field work for collection of data. Like in natural sciences, they do experimentation in laboratories. For social scientists like sociologists and social and cultural anthropologists, the field is out there in the open. So,
sir, are you sharing any slides?
No, I am not sharing any slides.
Okay, sir.
Yes. I'll go as slow as possible. So that's the difference between cultural anthropology and sociology, the field work of, and then that of the natural sciences. Their environment is controlled in the laboratories, but here in the open field, the atmosphere, the environment is not controlled. There are different factors which shape the environment of your field. There are many questions: how to choose your field, why do you go to a field, how to choose your field, and what are the problems you might encounter in the field, how to get entry into your field. And when I say field, this is not an open field like that. Basically, I'm referring to a group of people among whom a sociologist or cultural anthropologists go out to work to conduct their research. So the field here might mean a village, a town, a state, you know, a medical uh, uh, institution, a mental health institution, in a university. So these are all fields, and for sociologists and cultural anthropologists. So, and what is fieldwork therefore? You can easily understand that this is a method of collecting data for research by being directly among the community or the institution which is the subject here, right? So therefore fieldwork is central to sociology, but it guides to it often treat the real questions invisibly or overload the reader with micro details. Many of books that you might read may not, it might sound too mechanical, but there are very interesting descriptions of sociologists and cultural anthropologists, and from where you can get a lot of insights, in the sense that all the fields are not the same. Fields are again culture specific. Different field you go, so one mantra may not be enough, because you might face unforeseen situations in different fields. So that is a challenge, but also that is the most interesting part of fieldwork, and that is also the what should I say, the interest. That is what generates the interest in sociologists and cultural anthropologists, and that is what can make a new contribution. The study and the kind of data that you generate might contribute and enrich the subject. So that is the interest that fieldwork generates. Of course, as I said, fieldwork may be close to your house, close to your city, close to your habitat, but fieldwork, you might conduct field work in such places which might be far away. It might be a totally different culture. See, early anthropologists, social anthropologists, when they began fieldwork, say in early 19th century, fieldwork was conducted in faraway societies, and it was colonialism that facilitated the such fieldwork, because without colonialism in those places, it was not possible for many of the anthropologists to move to those places and to stay there for a prolonged period of time, because you do not conduct fieldwork in a week or 10 days. You have anthropologists used to spend years to conduct field work in faraway places. And I will give some examples of that. For example, Malinowski, Bronislaw Malinowski is very famous for his work among the Tobrian islanders of the Pacific Ocean. The Tobrian, he was there among the Tobrian islanders for almost 3 years, going from Britain. So, and at the end of the day, and end of his field work, he came out with his beautiful work, which set a new standard for conducting field work. But the issue is that without colonialism being there, it would not have been possible to move to Tobrian Island for him. So colonialism is one, therefore, facilitator of fieldwork, but things changed later on. Although, as I said, anthropologists first started working in such fields which they call other cultures or natives, other cultures. So these are not their culture, it is the other culture. So anthropologists conducted fieldwork in other cultures. So it was said that anthropologists are, they are expected to study other cultures, unlike sociologists who study their own society. Similarly, there are also differences in their approach. Traditionally, say for example, anthropological approach is more qualitative, but sociological approach in say for example in UK and United States was more statistical, more quantitative. However, now we see a merger of both the approaches, both in sociology as well as in anthropology, in cultural anthropology. Statistics, quantitative techniques are being used in both the subjects. But the difference is that in qualitative research, qualitative field work, what happens is that you give more importance to interpretation, in development of insights into the world of your subject. But on the other hand, in sociological research, what happens is that your importance, emphasis is more on seeing patterns. And traditionally speaking, however, it is also continued even today. And, say doing surveys, collecting data, you employ other assistants to collect data for you. And that kind of techniques are used for collecting data for sociologists. But when I say fieldwork, then traditionally, this is one person, either anthropologist or sociologist, who would go to the field. And although traditionally, field work was the preserve of anthropologists, later on, even sociologists started going to the fields and started emphasizing more on field work and the kind of field work which we call ethnography or participant observation. And what is ethnography? First, ethnography is a detailed description, a holistic account of the field, the people among whom you work. On the other hand, participant observation is a technique within ethnography. And what is participant observation? In participant observation, you spend time with the community. You try to learn their ways. You become a member of the community and participate in different activities of the community. So that you get intimate information, insights of the community. But participant observation, this kind of part, you can engage in participant observation to study only one phenomenon or event or a case. But ethnography is much comprehensive than that. And in ethnography, what you do, you spend, as I said, years. Sometimes it might run to 2-3 years, but you collect comprehensive data about the community. So you know different details of the community. You are not engaged only deciphering information only about a particular aspect of the community. So, as I said, ethnography is a whole perspective. It's a matter. It's an approach. Whereas participant observation is a way of collecting data. You can also have non-participant observation, where the field worker does not engage too intimately with the community. He maintains a distance and he observes things. He interviews people, but do not get into their life closely. So this is non-participant observation. Okay. Sometimes, however, there are also case studies, which is also a kind of field work, and where you do not spend very long time, perhaps you don't need to, but you go to study one specific phenomenon. Say, for example, a case of, say, you know, a case of homosexuality, so to say, a case of how the community again takes a homosexual, or how a community treats, say, for example, AIDS patient, that kind of things. So one particular aspect of it, it does not study the entire gamut of issues within the community. Okay, so we do see different kind of field works and methods that you use in field work. Now, why do we use field work in sociology or in cultural anthropology? We do it because the nature of the subject is to understand society and understand the people in which and the kind of relationship they enter into with each other. So this is a kind of only an interview may not be enough. It might be very superficial. The conclusions might be very superficial to collect, or survey may not be enough. So political scientists, they do surveys. Say, for example, who win election to predict elections, right? Electoral verdicts. So they do surveys, but these are limited for only one purpose, and there is nothing in-depth account of the subject, that is the people, right? So this is confined to only one or two aspects of what the community thinks about a particular issue. But similarly, historians, their laboratory is the archive. Okay, so they work in the archive. They collect data from the archive. The old historical data. But in contemporary history, they may also collect data from newspapers, newspaper reports, and things like that, which we also do. So their source of data is different from that of sociologists or cultural anthropologists, social anthropologists. And the in-depth studies that sociologists do or cultural anthropologists do is absent in, say, for example, in the studies conducted by economists or political scientists. So that is why it is incumbent on sociologists and social anthropologists to conduct in-depth studies in the field. And so fieldwork is a kind of essential component of any sociological study or anthropological study. And it is expected, it is believed that such studies can give you more in-depth information about a particular society, so that you can conclude, or arrive at serious conclusions about social structures, how societies transform, how these structures transform, how social change happens. All these issues can be studied much more seriously in depth. Similar, also, other thing is that you see there are many groups which may not be willing to share their information. If you just go and seek information from them, they may not be willing to share that. Okay, and today, for example, we often see how Google Forms are circulated to collect information. So here you do not get to see the person. You do not get to establish any kind of contact with the person, with your subject. So that does not allow you to collect in-depth information. In fact, in many places, when sociologists and social anthropologists go, the language is not known to them. And often they learn a new language, okay, if they go to other societies. But even within your own societies, there are many places where there are many people who are unknown to you. You are not exposed to their lifestyle or the problems of their day-to-day problems. You are not exposed to that. And there, you talk to them, you carry a recorder sometimes. You take either field notes or sometimes you carry a recorder. Now, why carrying a recorder is important? Because you see, while you take down notes, you often lose the emotions with which people talk. So these emotions, again, they give new meaning to their accounts. So if the narratives are devoid of emotions, which is, I mean, they are in your field notes, we may be missing many things. So it is very important, therefore, for sociologists to also capture the emotions, which can do only when perhaps they record it. However, there are many ethical issues about these things, which I'm just now going to elaborate. The first thing is, as I have now emphasized the importance of field study, how to select a field, how to enter into a field, are the two very important critical questions. Say you have a problem. Earlier, what used to happen was, anthropologists used to go to field and they used to give an entire account of the field. And most of the time, this field was what? Simple societies, tribal societies. These are called simple societies, uh, which are smaller in scale. And a village was enough to understand the community. So, but since these were quote unquote primitive societies, tribal societies, so you needed a kind of different approach to get entry into such societies. And at that time, you did not even know their language. And perhaps there would be nobody who will explain or who will teach you that language. So you have no other way but to go there and be among the people, earn their trust, and gradually pick up words or two and learn the language. That is why it is important that you spend longer duration in this kind of fieldwork. But these days, things have become little easier because there are many facilities through which you can learn your language, and there are possibilities of translation and things like that. So things have become relatively easier, but still there are many societies which have not seen the outside world. They do not have any interaction with, significant interaction with outside world, and they do not speak any other language. So you have to go there and stay with them and learn the language. So that kind of situation is still there, but still I would say that it has become much easier than it was before. We know common languages. There are lingua francas which are spoken by many people around the world. So things have become relatively easier. But even in your own society, when I say in your own society, I'm not saying only your neighborhood, but your neighborhood may also be definitely a subject of fieldwork, no doubt about that. But there are some problems when you study your own society, because there are a lot of subjectivities involved. It will be very difficult for you to present yourself as an objective person. And even your subjects, your neighbors, who know you very closely may have their own prejudices about you. They may have own biases about you. So such studies, the kind of conclusions which are drawn by such kind of fieldwork is not said to be very reliable. But often we study societies which may not be very far from my home, which may be close to my home, but I do not know about them. There are societies like that, and sociologists have studied such societies. And one very interesting study was conducted by William Footwhite, Street Corner Society, in Boston in 1943, and this book became a very important work on. Footwhite's work became very important marker for future field workers, especially how to work, say for example, among underground groups. Because is it possible to work among underground groups, gangs? It is not possible. In normal parlance, they will not share information with you. So how do you get entry into such societies? That is, however, an extreme case, but I will come back to this again a little later. But even in a normal society, you have a problem. You want to study something. You study, say for example, you want to study a forest village, a village which is situated near a forest, and you want to study their livelihood. You see, in most of the forest villages, you will find how these people are browbeaten by the forest department, and how outside timber mafias also use them for timber smuggling from the forest. So will they talk to you about that? Will they divulge the secrets of their trade? They will not, because if they do so, it might bring them harm, right? And to share such information to you, you must have faith. You must generate faith in them. They must have confidence in you. And this is not something that comes soon. It takes time, number one. Number two, since you are going to be there for a long duration, any kind of fake excuses will not work. Any kind of disguise, method perhaps may not work, where you are going to spend a couple of years. And therefore, it is very important that you generate confidence in you, among the community for you. So that is very important. Now, so how to select your field is a very important question. Number one, when you select the field, you have to also understand that, if you are doing, so for example, a PhD work or any kind of work which is funded by an outside agency, such studies are time bound. No studies can go on indefinitely. So you have to consider the time bound character of your study. If you take up some study where perhaps entry into the field might take you months, then it will be very difficult. So you have to be pragmatic here. And if you are going for a PhD work or a work for a limited period of time, then you have to be pragmatic. You have to pragmatically select the village. But if you have time at your disposal, then, and perhaps a topic which is very challenging, a subject which needs to be studied, or because it is very important, then perhaps you can take more time, because there is no bindings of time. So you can take more time, and you have enough funding. So in such situation, you can experiment with different kind of methods to get into the field. But for time-bound work, you have to be pragmatic. So therefore, generally, when I choose a field for a particular kind of work, I must see that first whether the field is representative or not. That means, say for example, I want to study out migration from my state. Okay, out migration, rural out migration, anywhere in India. Rural out migration is common in all the states. The villagers, they migrate to the metropolises and maybe more developed states where most of the time they turn out to be casual workers, in the informal sector of the economy. And so this is a pan-Indian phenomenon. Why it happens? I want to study that. Okay, so when I look for a field, I have to look for a representative field, so that working in a particular field or even a village can give me deep insight into the dynamics of rural outmigration in the entire state, or perhaps some understanding about rural outmigration of the entire country. So therefore the village have to be representative. The field has to be representative of the problem, for which it is important that you conduct some preliminary survey. And then, as I said, whether the village is representative, but whether it will be possible for you to work there. For example, if the village is flooded for a long time and of the year, and it is not possible for you to move there, then it will be very difficult for you to conduct any kind of field study. Because if in a time-bound program, that will not be possible. I mean, you won't, when you are not in a position to visit your field for 7, 8 months a year, then it is not possible to carry. It is not pragmatic to carry that kind of, choose that kind of field. So you have to be, the village have to be representative, and you have to be pragmatic. Now, once you choose your field, it is important that you see, you cannot simply go to your field. People might reject you. People may have different kind of apprehensions about you. They may not believe in you. So you need an entry point. Okay, if you know somebody beforehand in that village, it is of course a good thing. But if you do not know, generally, what we do, we look for a familiar person whom I may not directly know, but I know somebody who may know that person. So we establish some kind of communication with that person, and such persons are known as gatekeepers. Sometimes gatekeepers are, however, gatekeepers may be the the village hitman, or somebody who is powerful in that particular village, somebody who is perhaps a social leader. That kind of person also might turn out to be gatekeepers, but you have to be also careful, because sometimes the powerful people in the village, because they are part of the power structure, they might impose their own biases on you, and people may be sharing you things or not sharing things out of fear. So that might bring in bias in your work. So it is very important, therefore, for you to spend long period of time in the field to obviate the possibilities of such biases. So therefore, it is important that to get entry in the field, you need to find somebody who can make yourself comfortable in the field in the first place. And now it is up to you, because that is only a first step. But then you have to earn the confidence of the people by talking to them informally, not about your own topic, but talking to them informally about many things about their life. Not confidential things, but mundane things about their lives, right? So over a period of time, it might take 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 3, 4 months to enjoy their confidence, to get their confidence. And once you get it, you can move to the next stage. Now, before doing that, I think there are certain ethical considerations which I think a field worker uh, should be concerned. First and foremost, you must declare who are you to your subjects. What is your interest? Who is funding you? What is the intent of your work? Don't promise anything that you are not going to give them. Or don't promise anything which your study is not uh, you know is not some is not supposed to bring to the people. So tell them frankly, what is the purpose of your work? Who is funding your work? And don't promise them anything which you cannot give. Because you see, you often face this problem. When you go to field, people often think that you are a representative of the government. And perhaps you are going to bring, I mean, especially in the village, rural areas, you are going to bring them some government schemes or things like that. But if you're not going to do that, tell them very frankly. Of course, you can always say that you can publish, your work will be published, and you might also support a report to the government if your study is of that kind, to see that the village receives some benefits from the government. But that is a kind of indirect outcome of your work. That is not a direct objective of your work. Okay, so therefore there are very different ethical considerations which these days are taken very seriously. And the American Sociological Association has its own codes of ethics in social research, and which was formulated in 1989 and modified in 1997. We have other such ethical guidelines of different countries and associations. So we have to follow this very carefully. These days we have institutional ethics committees. So ethical issues are considered very seriously these days. Earlier, perhaps that kind of importance was not given in ethics in social science research. Although biomedical research researchers in biomedical has been always been very meticulous, very stringent about ethical issues, and because such research might pose direct physical harm to the subject of research. But that is not the case in social science research. But there is always a possibility of embarrassment and mental anxiety and things like that. And of course, in worst case, sometimes such anxieties might also lead to suicide. That is a different, very extreme case. Generally, that doesn't happen. But we have to be very careful about our own identity. We must see that in the field, we are not at the behest of somebody. Often it happens that, and that is why American Sociological Association came out with these guidelines, because in America there were these cases of collecting information from American public during the Vietnam War to generate, I mean, to understand the mood of the public, and and their approach to the army, and army funded that report. So such sociologists or social science professionals cannot indulge in this kind of practice. This is why the American Sociological Association, clearly spell out that you cannot be there as a sociologist, as a professional sociologist. You cannot be there in the field to collect intelligence for different kind of agencies or data for such data for say private interest or corporate sector. You are doing an advertisement, that is fine, this is open, but you cannot be there to collect secret information with a petty vested private vested interest. You cannot do that, and you cannot breach the trust of the people among whom you work. So you see, therefore, your entry into the field, the ethical issues that I have just highlighted, these are very important. And but there are, I pointed this out in the beginning, you see, or a little while ago, that you see there are certain kinds of report, certain kind of studies. Such studies are there which are very important to be studied, but it is not easy to collect data. What do we do in that kind of research? For example, I mentioned William Footwhite's work on the street corner society. He studied the Italian slums in Boston City, North Boston, and came out with some startling revelations about the society which he did not understand before. He himself come from white Anglo-Saxon background, but there, when he worked among the gangsters or among the gangs, it was not easy for him to get entry. So he disguised himself as one of them and spent time with them for a long time. And the members of the gang shared various kind of confidential information with him without knowing that he was there only in disguise, without knowing that he was not one of them. So they shared different kind of information, confidential information. Now, Footwhite, when his research was complete, he came out of that society and wrote his book. And there were a lot of ethical concerns whether this kind of deception in the field was permissible, and he faced many criticism for his work, for decepting his people, decepting his subjects in the field. And in fact, it was said that many of the members of the gang were offended when they saw them in the narratives. It is not that their names were divulged, their identities were revealed. It is not that, but these people could identify themselves when some accounts were made in the book. And obviously there would be also some kind of anxiety, because they might also think, although their names are not in the book, perhaps these issues, these information are shared with police. So there might be some kind of anxiety among them. So, Footwhite came under a lot of criticism to start with. But later on, in the 1950s, when the second edition of the book came out, these kind of deception in the fieldwork was not totally shunned, and it was felt that for this kind of study, it was important to resort to some kind of deception. Otherwise, an in-depth study of the inside of these secret societies cannot come out. Similar studies have also been made, because Footwhite's study became a kind of marker, kind of yardstick for such such studies. say, if such studies do not harm the the subjects, and it is done in a broader sociological interest, this kind of, and not on some personal or private petty interest, or not in the interest of security agencies, this kind of studies can also be accepted. So, as I said, there are ethical concerns, but some kind of studies may be in deceptions, some kind of, in some studies, these kind of deceptions may be allowed. And so that is another very important consideration. You know, in the Indian context, I have given you a very general idea about how you conduct field study, how you get entry into the field study, different kind of problems that you face in the field, different kind of ethical issues that you should be concerned with. But these are general issues. In the Indian, as I said, different societies may have different kind of cultural life, different, you know, cultural patterns, and requires different kind of accommodation, adjustment. And one very interesting term which was coined was culture shock. When anthropologists went to study new societies, especially some you know, tribal societies, they were in shock about certain practices, because these societies, these practices are concerned taboos in their own society, prescribed in their own society. But in those societies, these kind of practices were considered normal. So in such matters, of course, there is culture shock, but it is incumbent on the anthropologists or sociologists not to impose their own preferences or civilizational traits on the subject society, the field, right? And in fact, many would today say that a trained sociologist or anthropologist would not face that kind of problem. A trained field worker knows how to accommodate, how to negotiate with this kind of situation and accept, because this kind of situation, because culture is relative. Culture is relative, although it is universal. It is one of the paradoxes of culture. Culture is there everywhere, but it is also relative. Its expression is different in different societies. So in fact, it might sometimes, you know, not culture shock in your own, in a different society, but after spending years, if you come back to your own society, you might also again be in for a culture shock. That kind of situation might also happen. But anyway, that is also another aspect of fieldwork. Now, there have been beautiful illustrations, beautiful works on doing fieldwork. If you are interested, I can name one such very good work on doing fieldwork. The name of the book is Doing Fieldwork by Christopher Paul and Sam Hilliard, published by Sage Publication. Which the name of the book is Doing Fieldwork. That is a very interesting book. Another very interesting work on fieldwork is written by mostly Indian sociologists and social anthropologists. The name of the book is Fieldwork and the Fieldworker. And 3 eminent Indian sociologists edited that particular book. They are M.N. Srinivas, A.M. Shah, and E.A. Ramaswamy. And this book was published in 1979 by Oxford University Press. It was reprinted again in 2004. There are 18 essays on fieldwork, the kind of problem you face in the fieldwork, the challenges in the fieldwork, how you negotiate the situations in the fieldwork. So there are 18 essays. Apart from India, essays on Sri Lanka, Japan, New Mexico are also there in that book. So if you are interested, those who are interested, may have a look at that book. Especially, there are 18 essays and very insightful essays on doing field work in a kind of cross-cultural context. So if you're interested, you can definitely go through that book. I think I have taken my time. Let me stop here and take questions if there are any.
Sir, there are two questions in the chat box. May I read from there?
Please, please.
Okay. Sir, one question is kindly elaborate on how to determine whether the field is representative or not. What are the parameters we should look?
Right. Let me respond to that. You see, it depends on what kind of question you are taking for your field, I mean, for your study. And therefore, as I said, you have to collect some previous information. And sometimes this previous information may be available in literature. That particular area may have already produced, the work in that particular area may have already produced some literature. So you may have a look at those literature and understand that particular field, or you may also talk to people who know that particular area, whether that is suitable for your work or not, to understand whether that particular area is suitable for you or not. So it is very difficult to say uh, 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 what are the different parameters. The parameters, as I said, first, whether it represents, whether it can bring you the data that you are looking for. See, when I say doing field work, means it's a very intensive work. We believe that, to study, for example, rural outmigration, we know what happens in the rural areas. Agriculture is in a shambles, and people have no livelihood opportunity. So in the metropolises, they know that there are early birds who have migrated and tell you stories about how they can earn cash, etc. So there are pull factors as well as push factors, right? So you want to study rural outmigration in a particular area. You may find, however, very unique things. That is a different issue. But whether what you are looking for is, in your, say, for example, I want to study rural outmigration from Assam, then I must go to a society which can give me, first I have to know, what is the generic situation in Assam. And then I have to see whether that situation or some kind of situation is prevailing in that particular area or not. If there are any uniqueness in that area, that will be also a contribution. So I must be able to say that by studying this particular village, I can give a kind of idea about the issue of rural outmigration in Assam. Now, when we do that, you see, we must see that the village is not very small. If the village has only 50 households, that may not give you a good enough data. So generally look for villages which have at least 300, 200, 300 households, right? So that there is a, what should I say, a reasonable amount of data to support a particular fact, right? Number two is, and for all these, as I said, you need to conduct a preliminary survey. Apart from reading about the village, about the area, talking about the area to people who know these place, you have to also conduct a preliminary survey. Sometimes it so happens that you discover that not that area, but a village somewhere nearby, is more suitable for your work. So therefore, it differs from differs from situation to situation, and it depends on the wisdom and the judgment of the researcher as to how he goes about selecting his field.
Okay, sir. The next question is from Madhusudan Mandal. He wants to know about the funding agencies that are available inside our country or around the globe for the academic of social science research activities.
In our country, of course, earlier UGC used to be one of the, and I think still continues to be one of the funding agencies. Apart from that, ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Science Research, also funds social science projects. But we also have the Anthropological Survey of India and different other international agencies, national and international agencies operating in India. There are many such grants, fellowship, and funds for projects available, and you might explore such possibilities. I mean, in the Google also you can look at such sources of fund for social science in India. I mean, national sources as well as international sources. There are many. In fact, in India, earlier Ford Foundation used to be one of the important funders of social science research. But ICSSR, UGC, Anthropological Survey of India, these still continue to be important sources of social science research. Similarly, institutions like these days Observer Research Foundation, which is a private research body, however, they also do fund research organizations. Similarly, we have Maulana Azad Institute of Asian Studies in Kolkata under the Ministry of Culture. They also do fund social research. Similarly, Ministry of Culture also do fund social research. So there are many agencies which we see in India funding social research. Although, however, I must say that funding in social research is relatively less and a little more problematic than in science. So there is more competition for the limited resources in social science research.
Sir, Dr. Sanchita wants to know, how do you create a representative sample in the fieldwork?
Right. You know, when you conduct a field work, if the field work is of ethnographic kind, then you do not go for sample, right? So, but if you are conducting a study, some kind of survey, say among 300 villages, there are different ways in which you may collect the sample. Say, for example, you want to look at how many, say, for again, the question of outmigration. I want to study how many people have outmigrated from the village. So what I can do, I can take up every second village or every third village, whatever, for my sample to examine how many. So if I find that 50% of the households out of the 1/3 have moved out, then I said 50% of the households in the village have 50% villages in the village have outmigrants in the village, right? So depends on, and if the sample is very big, the universe is very big, 1,000 households, you don't need to study the 1,000 households. You may also study say 200 of them, say every 5th household, to get a reasonable insight into the dynamics of outmigration in a village. right? So that, I mean, it all depends on what is the size of your universe and what kind of data you want to collect.
Sir, Kuldeep both wants to ask, if I'm going to study the impact of mining on the health of local people of a city, what may be the sufficient sample size?
Mining in the life of our
The
city.
health of local people in the city.
Yes, yes. You see, generally what happens, you get to know as to what is the impact like. And already there might be some work, some newspaper reports or some project reports on these issues. These reports might also help. Okay, and then you have to observe whether, you know, there is a city. I think when an activity like mining takes place, such activity is not only confined to a small area. The intensity of the impact may be more in a particular area, perhaps which is closer to the perhaps mining site. But the entire city is going to be affected more or less by mining activities. So it depends on, therefore, the size. See, a city generally consists of population, say maybe 5 lakh, 10 lakh. So obviously you are not going to conduct information, I mean, its impact like that on all the people. But here you can always take cases. For example, sometimes what you can do, you may have, because you are not going to do an in-depth study. You can also do that, but what you can do, you can take a sample of say 500 people in the village, because this is not going to be an intensive study. You can always collect information about 500 people. That is good enough from different parts of the city. And you may, however, also focus on 10 case studies, which might give you, you can say that people and these 500 people may be scattered in different parts of the city. And you know where the, perhaps thereby, where the intensity of impact is more, where it is a little less. At the same time, you can also take some case studies to do intensive study, say 10 case studies. What this kind of impact has done, pollution has done to the people's health. Okay, so you have both a kind of extensive study of the population, but at the same time, you also reinforce that study, strengthen that study by these 10 case studies. So you can therefore mix up your method of studying.
So Venkat wants to ask, I would like to travel abroad to complete fieldwork and need to take a number of expensive research devices with me. What types of permits are required?
So if you are going to conduct biomedical research or you know, research in physical sciences, I do not know what are different kind of permits you'd require, but I'm sure you know, there are regulators there and which has laid down procedures and rules as to what needs to be done. Okay, I think I do not know from which background you come, but I'm sure every faculty, every department, every discipline has its own guidelines, and naturally you cannot carry all kinds of equipment outside, and you also cannot bring in perhaps all kinds of equipment. You need government permission. Even in the airport, you will need different kind of permission for for carrying out or in this kind of equipment. So here I believe the respective regulator or departments can guide you better.
So he also wants to know how to do fieldwork during pandemic.
Oh, there are different ways. You see, in social science, because fieldwork is so important, that became a very big problem for social science researcher. And because communities also create their own barricades, it was not possible to move into the community. They would not allow any outsider. So social science research definitely did suffer during the pandemic. But what many people continued to do was to have conversation going with their field, because you have the telephones these days, okay, mobile phones. So you do not necessarily talk about your fieldwork those days because people are so anxious, but you can still keep the conversation going. You can ask them about their well-being, about what they are doing, whether they are having enough food stuff, whether any people are suffering in the village. So you keep that relationship going. And occasionally you might ask a question or two about your own research. So this is how people like me, I conducted my research during the fieldwork. Obviously, this was definitely not what definitely not enough. But because the kind of project we have are time bound, we have to get it. You have to see that it is continuously happening in some kind of collaboration. It should not be like, there was no conversation going between me and my field and subjects in the field. And it also should not be like, even during those time of pandemic, I'm only concerned about my research and asking only questions about my research, or not asking any question. And at the end of the pandemic, when there was better time, I go back there and started and asking questions. People will not accept you like that. So it is there, as I said, in fieldwork, a continuous confidence building, rapport with the people is very important. Pandemic, in a way, also gives us a chance to see that people know we are also concerned about them, to convince that we are also concerned about them. But yes, I agree that it created a lot of problems for social science research. In fact, scientists also suffered. Laboratories, because institutions were closed, and and researchers in sciences also were forbidden, restricted to work in the laboratories. So you see, there have been different kind of uh, restrictions, different kind of problems that pandemic threw up. But yes, social scientists were the most battered lot in terms of their research. But as I said, keep the conversation going. And between telephonically, you can also collect different kind of data. You talk to them, keep talking. And because it also threw up a different kind of situation, the pandemic. And what kind of impact it had on the village can also be a subject of study, you see. And this is actually a methodological challenge. And your methodology section, data collection section, your methodology section also definitely should have an account about how you collected data during the pandemic.
Okay, for any other questions, participants may unmute themselves and ask their questions. If any more queries and observations are there. So if not, then I think we can wind up the session here. And would like to offer our thanks to Professor Chandan Kumar Sarma sir for your very enlightening session that you have focused on doing field work, which is more or less applicable to all the disciplines. And I think participants will also carry forward the experience that sir has shared with us all, and it will be benefited for all. So thank you, sir, for giving.
Thank you very much, Sapna. Thank you so much, and thank you all the participants, and especially those who have asked those probing questions. Thank you very much. I hope I could satisfy your curiosity, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks to all the participants.
Thank you.
Hey,